Hello and welcome to our first lesson on biopsychology. This is a new unit, particularly if we've finished the psychopathology unit. We are now moving into the biopsychology unit, and I know some of my year 13s will be very interested in this, seeing that a majority of them asked me if I could go back over that for them, so they can use this as a form of revision. But as for those of you who are studying biopsychology for the first time, this is just to give you a brief little introduction to it, what we expect to cover, and then a look at the nervous system. So let's get into it. So what we're going to look at learning. So we're looking at learning the divisions of the nervous system. That's the central and the peripheral nervous systems. We will be looking at that today. The structure and function of the sensory relay and motor neurons, the process of synaptic transmission, including reference to neurotransmitters, excitation and inhibition. Now, if you've looked at OCD and the treatment of OCD, you would know already a little bit about that, particularly neurotransmitters and inhibitors, in particular when we're looking at drug therapy. We're looking at the function of the endocrine system, that is, endocrine system, and that is glands and hormones. That we'll be looking at in the next lesson. Then the fight or flight response, including the role of adrenaline. We'll be looking at the fight or flight response in just a little bit of detail today, but that will be also moved to another lesson. The localization and of function in the brain, and the hemispheric lateralization, motor, sensor, somatosensory, visual, auditory, and language centers. We'll be looking at the Broca's and Wernicke's areas, the split brain research, plasticity and functioning recovery of the brain after trauma. We'll be looking at the ways of studying the brain. So these are all the different scanning techniques, all the way from fMRIs to EEGs, ERPs, and looking at the brain post-mortem. And then lastly, we'll be looking at the biological rhythms. It's the circadian, the infradian, the ultradian, all these differences that we'll be looking at in between these rhythms, the effects on the endogenous pacemakers and exogenous Zeitgebers on the sleep and wake cycle. So this is what we're in for. This is quite a lot of biology that we'll be looking at, so if you've got an interest in this, this should be quite interesting. So let's begin. We will start off by looking at the nervous system today, and by the end, you should feel relatively confident in explaining the different the layout of the nervous system. Speaking of, if we can go to the next slide, please. Okay, so here's our learning objective for today. So we want to understand the functioning of the nervous system. Out of it, you will want to understand the different components. So there's many different components that make up the nervous system. I want you to build a glossary. So it's really important that you have the key words written down, and then I want you to apply your understanding to some scenarios as well. Okay, so what do you need to know? You need to know the divisions of the nervous system. This is your central and peripheral. The function of the endocrine system, the glands and hormones, that's actually another lesson, and then the fight or flight response. So here we go, the nervous system. Our nervous system is a complex network of nerve cells. So these are things which are used to transport all the messages from your brain and the spinal cord to all the different parts of the body. It helps coordinate everything from movement to your organs to how you're going to go about doing anything, really, how you respond to situations. So we're going to subdivide this into different areas. So don't worry about taking notes for this slide. It will be for the following slides. You'll need to worry about notes. Okay, so here are the divisions of the human nervous system. We'll start by looking at the central nervous system, here on called the CNS. We're referring to the CNS, and this is made up of your brain and your spinal cord. So think of it, because it is literally, if you split a person down the middle, you have their brain, spinal cord. So that's the central nervous system. This is your main highway of your how information is transferred. Then we'll be looking at the peripheral nervous system down to the somatic, autonomic, can't speak today, and then we've got the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems. So let's start off with the central nervous system. So think brain, spinal cord. It controls the behavior and regulation of the body's physiological processes. So it's not to do with anything too detailed. It's your main highways. It's the center of all consciousness. And it does two things. So it receives information and it sends it. That's simply like, it's like the motherboard of a computer, really, if you're interested in that. Your spinal cord in particular is an extension of the brain. And that's why I say it's like a highway before you hit the little streets. It plays a major part in the body's physiological process, and it consists of a collection of nerve cells which are attached to the brain and run the length of the spinal column. So that is your central nervous system, your CNS, done, and we head to the peripheral nervous system. So you can see in the picture we have our central nervous system here, which is your brain, spinal cord, and then we're going to have our peripheral nervous system. And these consist of all the other nerves which are actually not part of the CNS. So they reach out to all the other parts of the body, and these are like the streets that I call them, the streets and the back streets, all the way from the, down to the tips of your toes, as well as your internal organs. It is further divided into two parts. So we're going to have our somatic system and then our autonomic, which we're going to look at secondly. So we'll look at the somatic system first. And the way that I say to remember is that it's on the outside, which is your periphery. So it's quite easy to remember. Okay, so what does it actually do? So it connects your central nervous system to your organs, your limbs, and skin. So the nerves that you feel in your skin are peripheral nerves. It carries sensory and motor information. I'm going to explain what we mean by sensory and motor information. It allows the brain and the spinal cord to receive and send information, as well as regulate your involuntary bodily functions, like your heartbeat and breathing. Obviously, you can have some control over that. So you can consciously slow down your heart rate simply by holding your breath. And the longer you hold your breath, your heartbeat. But that doesn't mean that you are having to consciously make your heart beat. You're not doing that. Your heart will beat automatically because of your peripheral system, in particular your autonomous system. So let's have a look and see how the somatic nervous system works. So remember, this is one part, and then you've got your other part. So your somatic nervous system, it maintains communication effectively between your CNS and the outside world. So your CNS is running through the middle, and what it does, it's the pathway between whatever it is on the outside to your CNS. If we have a look, it consists of 12 pairs of cranial nerves and 31 pairs of spinal nerves, and includes both sensory receptors and motor pathways. And I've got a picture here which can explain hopefully what I mean by this. So your sensory receptors carry information to your spinal cord and brain. So in this case, this person is got a candle here that they are feeling, and the signal will go from the feeling that they have. Oh no, actually here it is here. Here's what they're feeling. So they're feeling it here, sorry. They feel it here. This is your sensory because you're sensing something. It's to do with your feeling. He feels the heat, and that signal travels up and to his spinal cord, which will then travel up through his CNS up to his brain. The brain would then send a signal, and this is your motor pathway, and it will then allow, and this is the blue line, it will then travel from the brain through to the muscle to pull away, because I don't want to damage your hand. So sensory is what you feel, motor is your response, how you move. Okay, and I think I also have some more detailed pictures here again. So you can see that we have the sensory cortex, which is this part of the brain, which is right beside the motor cortex. You can see they are right beside each other. So Again, you sense something, it goes up, through, along your somatic sensory pathway to your CNS, travels up to the sensory cortex. This then goes from your motor cortex then, you can see the brain traveling down the CNS all the way to the muscles. So that's the difference between a sensory pathway and a motor pathway. Excellent. So let's put this into practice, shall we? So I've got a scenario. The bell rings and the student starts packing up their bags. So this is an all day in school. Hearing the bell, I know our school doesn't have bells at the end of class, but most schools do. Okay, so here's my analysis. The sound of the bell, so that's your sensory, is picked up by the student's ears and transmitted via the peripheral nervous system to the brain. So it's a sensory message. Your brain has got the sensory input, so your ears has the sensory input, goes directly to your brain, which is rather convenient. Doesn't have to go up through the spinal cord. The brain recognizes the bell and interprets it as a signal and processes it, saying that this means the class has ended. To fulfill the goal of packing up and going elsewhere, the brain then sends your messages to your somatic nervous system, and these are motor messages carried by your spinal cord now, so we're going down, which tells you that you need to start moving. So this will allow you to pick up your belongings, grab your stuff, and throughout this process, your brain relies on visual sensory input via your PNS in order to identify the location of objects, whatever is your possession, what's not your possession, to coordinate then your muscles and your movement to make sure that what you're doing is accurate. So I want you to try and do this as well. I'm going to give you your own story. So you're walking towards the bus stop, you see the bus coming. So obviously you're waiting for the bus, obviously. So what happens to your nervous system? And I want you to try and run through using the words in bold in your answer. So just pause the video, run through how can you put the pieces in and together for this story of waiting for the bus. So pause the video, and then we'll see you when you're finished. Okay, so the autonomic nervous system. Now this is what regulates your involuntary actions, so your heartbeat, your digestion. No one really has control over what's going on in these parts of the body, your liver, your kidneys, etc. And you can see all these key organs here which are involved in this. You don't have conscious control over this. So it's divided into two sections that we're going to look at more in a moment. So we've got your sympathetic nervous system, and this is what gets us ready for our fight or flight response. And then you've got your parasympathetic nervous system, and this is your body at rest. What is going on when you're relaxing, and this is known as the rest and digest. So fight, flight, rest, digest. I'm going to teach you a way in how to remember the difference between these two. But think auto. So auto is in automatic. So autonomous learners meaning independent, and that is what the ANS is. It keeps itself going. You don't need to think about it. So from the moment of your conception, you have not had to think about, what your blood pressure is supposed to be, and you're feeling a particular way, and you can consciously change that. That's something you can't do. So here we go. You've got your parasympathetic and your sympathetic. Now, your sympathetic is your fight or flight response, and I think of it as your sympathetic system actually isn't that sympathetic. It is what is happening when you are under stress. So when you are under stress, if you look, your eyes will dilate, meaning your pupils will get bigger to enhance your far vision, or you will decrease saliva production, your heart rate will increase, your blood pressure will increase. Continuing down, you can see that your particularly in your lungs will dilate to allow more air. So your bronchi will dilate, meaning they'll get bigger to allow more air, and not necessarily air, have a larger oxygen intake. You will increase blood flow to your muscles. So this is when we'll then talk about adrenaline. You will reduce your stomach and an intestine motility. So this will divert a lot of blood away from your G-tract and reduce digestive enzyme secretion. You will then release a lot of blood sugar, a lot of glucose to increase your blood sugar, get more energy into your system, particularly your ATP and that kind of stuff. It will, what else will it do? It stimulate your adrenal glands to secrete stress hormones and will relax your bladder, which is why often for a lot of people, when they come under stress, they feel like they need to go to the bathroom. Or sometimes under extreme stress, people will wet themselves, given this. So this is your sympathetic, and you can see it's obviously not sympathetic. It is what's causing you to be stressed. Well, no, it's reacting to what is causing you to be stressed. Then your parasympathetic system is what keeps you, what happens when you're calm or when you're chill. So right now, during this, you shouldn't really be having an increased heart rate. You might be starting to feel a bit hungry. You're in a very relaxed state. Your heart, lungs is just regular breathing, nothing too extreme. Sympathetic, parasympathetic. Okay, so as I already said, your sympathetic NS does not feel very sympathetic. So think about how you feel physically when you're stressed. Does it match up with some of these? And we've already gone over some of these. So have a look. You can pause the video if you like. Right, so here's a scenario. So starting to put this into practice again. Imagine someone shouts unexpectedly at you and makes you jump. Your reaction feels instant because your hypothalamus, so it's part of your brain, has triggered a chain of activity from your sympathetic NS, and it readies the body for action, shutting down a lot of unnecessary tasks such as digestion. In this moment, do I need to be digesting? No. And making the body physiologically aroused. It is part of the fight or flight response and the immediate part. Once you realize it is just your friend being annoying, your brain will then responds by using the parasympathetic branch of your ANS to one by one to start to reset the organ to its normal resting state. In this way, you can think of the sympathetic and parasympathetic ANS as acting as a seesawing pair. Only one can be active at a time. So under stress, sympathetic. Under relaxation or just normal environment, parasympathetic. Okay, so use this information on the left, and we're going to complete a table on the next slide. So you may need to bounce between this bit and the next bit. You have the slideshow. You got access to that. I've sent you the link on my OneDrive, which you should be able to then access this PowerPoint. So here we go. So I want you to fill out what is going on. So we've got the parasympathetic NS on one side, and then what's the effect on the other side. And I make the point that you don't need to memorize all of these terms, but you should be able to understand what they mean and what the real life consequence of that is. So you can print this off if you want. You can just print it off this page and copy it out. Otherwise, I'd like you to write it down into your books, please. Pause the video, finish it off, and then click play once you're done. Okay, so let's check your understanding. So for each of these scenarios in the table to the right, I want you to say whether it is the sympathetic or parasympathetic nervous system is responsible and what this branch of the nervous system is doing. So I've got an example. So we'll look at the first one. It says, Sue is so nervous before a driving test and she can't eat a thing for breakfast. So obviously this is her sympathetic NS. She can't eat because it affects her stomach and inhibits her digestion. So I would probably write down sympathetic inhibits digestion. So if you do that for, 3 words. If you do that for the rest of them, there's how many more to do? 5 more to go. So you should be able to do this relatively quickly. You could probably do it in your head. You don't need to write this into your book. It's not something you can refer back to unnecessarily. So I'd rather you just simply have a read through and pair it up, but it's quite easy. It should not be hard to do. Okay, also checking your knowledge now. I want you to try and do this without looking at the textbook or without looking at your book. Okay, first I want you to try and mentally do it. So ignore the little instruction there. I want you to first try and mentally do it. So we know it's the human nervous system. Then I want you to try and mentally fill this in from what you have just learned. And then once you've done that, I want you to then copy it into your book, okay? So this is a way just to make sure that you have understood it. And you can add more annotations around that if you so wish. But I would really like you to have this as a nice, easy, visual reminder. I believe there is a better one embedded somewhere in my slide. It's a hidden slide somewhere in here. It's not going to come up, so you can try and find it in there. I'm pretty sure it's hidden up near the start, I think it is. I think it's about slide 4. Okay, so this is the glossary. I want you to make sure you're done. You've probably already written this stuff down, to be honest. So just make sure you highlight these key terms in your book, make them stand out. And if you don't, the definitions to it are in your booklet. I think it's about 113 in the green haired booklet, and I think it's about page 30 of the pink haired booklet. Yeah, it's 34 of the pink haired booklet that I have here. So I'm also using that, the pink haired book. Okay, and what do we know now? So we have covered the structure and purpose of the nervous system. You have written some notes down, hopefully, and you've completed a diagram. You haven't finished everything yet from this section. We're still got to do the endocrine system. If you want any further help, there are some video links here that I highly recommend that you do. Crash Course has got a fantastic video on the central nervous system, introduction to nervous system. I think you only need to watch the first 6 minutes. It is a lot more in depth than what I have covered because it's more for biology. So whereas we're looking at more so from a psychological point of view, we don't need to go into the great amount of depth that they do. We will look at the different parts of the brain, FYI. So some of you might have thought I've skated over the brain, but no, that's coming up in a future lesson. Otherwise, you can just email me or respond to my task that I've set on Share My Homework. Apart from that, I think that's all I have for now. So that should have taken not too long for you to do, probably about half an hour, 40 minutes. So I'll see you in the next video. When I upload a video, I mean, I don't want to be that person, but feel free to subscribe, and that way you get a little heads up when I put up a video. So fortunately, this one is not sponsored by Raid Shadow Legends. So I'll see you in the next video.